Welcome to Cultural Fluency Makers. I'm your host, David Wellish. Each week, we welcome leaders to share how they stay ahead of the ever-changing consumer landscape. With today's cultural transformation, top brands need to understand diverse consumer segments from Gen Z, Hispanic, and LGBTQ+ to gamers, wine enthusiasts, and basketball fanatics in Iowa. Their marketing strategies require them to keep the pulse on their consumers, but also their brand in the category to continue to grow revenue for the long term. Cultural Fluency Makers is sponsored by Collage Group, the only cultural intelligence engine that provides brand and consumer insights on the why that drives consumer behavior and purchase decisions. Let's get started. I am so excited for this episode. This will be a special one because we're going to be speaking both about our traditional B2C world, but also B2B world, which will be really, really great. With me today is an experienced communications analyst leader and a frequent conference and webinar speaker. She has expertise in translating advanced analytics to communication strategies, building MarTech stacks, and developing and optimizing KPI frameworks. She's the head of customer insights for North America at LinkedIn. Nicole Moreo, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me.
It's great to have you. All right, let's do this. So Nicole, we'll start with sort of consumer, although in the world of customers and consumers, there's actually an intersection, right? Ultimately, everybody's people, but the world continues to change in this country. The demographic landscape has shifted and continues to evolve. What we find fragmentation, polarization, and obviously diverse consumers driving so much of the growth. The question, maybe as a starting point, Nicole, is tell us in your world and what you see the role for cultural insights, cultural intelligence in what you do.
Right. So I think the biggest place for insights to play is connecting the dots between a lot of times what brands think their audience cares about versus what they actually care about. So I think one of the biggest issues that we see is everyone kind of assuming or chasing a vanity idea, vanity metric, things that we've always been doing, when in reality, the power comes from understanding who your audience is, where they are, how they're spending your time, and really think about how do we not chase an unknown and really understand what insight can lead to impact for us. So I think if we're thinking about the world of cultural relevancy, it's really how do you not chase virality or the cool thing that's out there to really drive influence in a trusted environment. And our job as whether you're an analyst, an insights role, whatever that might be, is what is that trusted environment? What drives that influence? And how do you connect the dots there?
I mean, you said, I love what you said, which is the difference between what brands think audience want versus what they want, and that's it. But that's the gap. And given the complexity, because I think we live in a complex world, from a consumer landscape. Again, the level of polarization. I mean, diversity, and I'm going to say politics aside, just makes it. There's so many different opinions and identities, and so how does one get to that gap that you so eloquently mentioned? Which is the difference between what you think and what it actually is.
Right. I think we say this all the time. Our job as marketers or communicators, we're really charged with influencing or shifting behaviors, perceptions, or actions, right? That's at the end of the day what we're looking at. And to do that, you have to really think about who's the right audience within that right context at that right moment that you can change that behavior, perception, or action. What has been interesting for me is seeing the evolution of how deep you need to go or maybe don't need to go in order to get those messages out there. So for example, I think you're probably even aware for years, there was the obsession with hyper segmentations and audience profiling. And those take years sometimes to get done, right? And then they become the same audience profile you use for a year, 2 years. when we know there's so much change happening. I remember when I was at Ketchum, the agency, and we did some analysis during COVID, and it was really looking at how fast audience people numbers moved from maybe being scared to comfortable when they were in that COVID range, or being hyper interested in information to overload of information, and they took a step out. It used to be that you'd be like, oh, let's go after the underinformed people who only use one platform, and let's just target them for however long we want to. We were seeing that people are switching in and out much faster than they ever had. And so if we're really trying to ask ourselves how to do that, this hyper segmentation, we have data at LinkedIn that's proving you're actually hurting yourself as a brand or a marketer by hyper segmenting. It's really asking yourself, who's the full audience that I'm looking at? How do I reach them between a mix of efficiency and effectiveness? And that sometimes helps balance, to your point, people get new news every single day, and it's going to change potentially how they interact. And you can't constantly be switching who you are as a brand. You have to ask yourself, who am I? What is the space? What do I know about that I can get a consistent message out there? Because that's what our audiences trust. And then learn and adjust as you go through optimizing and metrics over time.
Nicole, has the evolution of tools and platforms and in terms of the insights world made it easier?
This is a mixed bag. It's interesting. I think I've been on a few roundtables for AI or other things, and people ask, like, what are you most excited about? And I listen to a lot of C-suite members or decision makers say things. I'm excited for the access to data. I'm excited for better dashboards. I'm excited to all these things. Meanwhile, in the back of my mind, I'm like screening. I'm like, yeah, the bad data in is still bad data out. And I think what we're seeing is there's so many new tools and platforms, and some are and amazing. We partner with some. I partnered some of the past. They're some of the best partners out there. But everybody has their own way sometimes of collecting the data. There's the companies that are, especially with the rise of AI, there's the black box of you're not entirely sure how some of that's coming in or out. So I think at the end of the day, it's very powerful. We have access to more data than ever before. But where the role that we need to ask ourselves is, are we asking the data the right questions? Are we setting up correctly? What are the goals that we're actually trying to achieve? And the reason I say that is, especially at LinkedIn, the number of people who say things like, oh, well, the cost is too high, or there's not enough efficiency. I'm like, yeah, but are we trying to optimize to cost or to changing a behavior, perception, or impact? Are we optimizing to a click, or are we changing to ROI? And in this world, the amount of data that's out there, people are making these quick, fast, snap decisions because a dashboard tells them, and they're not asking the relevant question that ties back to why. What's the so what, now what? What does this tie to the business goal we're trying to achieve, or the culture goal we're trying to achieve? And that's what makes me nervous as someone in this space. Is we are more powerful than ever with the amount of data that we have, but executing on that data correctly, I think we are becoming a little numb to the amount of data we have, and not always asking the right questions.
I love that. So we're data inundated.
Yeah.
We are data inundated. You can assess and evaluate the quality of the data, but let's assume the quality is there. Are we why inundated? Right? Like, do we know enough about what's driving, what behavior is driving the data? And when you see it, when there's a kernel of insight, right? Like, it's so exciting. We're gonna nerd out. Right? Like, when you actually find a nugget of behavior that you can monetize, that you can really build around, that's exciting. So my question, Nicole, for you is, what's hard about all this? What are the key challenges?
So I think something we're with my LinkedIn hat on, we're really evaluating is, data access and privacy. Privacy is changing every day, depending on, especially if you're a global company. And let's be honest, even if you aren't, the way consumers interact and conversations are happening, it's global, right? It's happening. But every country, region, I feel like we are dealing with new rules and regulations that are coming out at all times. And I think what's been interesting with that is, to your point, some tools and partners are great at keeping up, some aren't. Some then brands and companies don't trust some of the data that's coming in because of that. So it's making sure right now we have access to some great data. We know, though, that with cookie lists and all this, some of that might be going away, or some insights that we have. We know it's harder than ever to get surveys taken. There's the rise of synthetic research and data that's coming into play. So it's really asking ourselves, data accuracy, data privacy, and data relevance are going to be some of the biggest issues facing this area. There was a great quote. Oh, I really hope I'm attributing this correctly, but I think it was from a Kantar study. It's like, what's the insights team of tomorrow? And there was a quote in there from a C-suite person basically saying, if one more insights person tells me, well, the data tells me, I'm going to scream, because I don't care what the data tells me. What action should I be taking? What is the thing I should be doing? And so one of the biggest challenges is we're going to have more data than ever. However, I think we're going to see potentially a dip in trust in some of that data. And then we're also not going to necessarily have the time to put the so what into it, because there's going to be expectation for, well, AI or tools or systems could give me this data now, so why can't you give me an answer now?
Interesting. So data relevancy and actions. What do we do? And I guess in the era of AI will also issue recommendations and then what to do. And so, the question will be how effective or not effective, but that's interesting that it's not, the AI is not just about data, but it's an intelligent system that will be able to actually, therefore, here are the three things that you should do. What is the impact in your world, or what do you see the differences between the B2B world and the B2C world?
It's interesting. So prior to joining LinkedIn, when I was at an agency, I had clients that were pretty famous chip brands all the way to B2B. And now I'm, very much in that B2B landscape. I think what's very funny to me, and this is, this is my view. Everyone always thinks like it's wildly different. Don't get me wrong. There are some differences, but at the end of the day, it's still trying to meet the right people at the right place at the right time to solve a specific goal. And as long as you define each of those, a human is a human, right? It's not like I put my hat on that one day I'm buying a shirt and the next day I'm buying a data tool and I'm a completely different person. I'm me. I'm spending my time. When I wake up, there are things and actions I do. There's behaviors I do. When I'm working, those behaviors I'm doing. There's things I'm interacting with. When I take a break, there's things I'm doing, I'm interacting with. Understanding that whole person is critical. We have a lot of sometimes people saying to LinkedIn, well, I'm not B2B or whatever. I don't need to be on that I don't need to be on your platform. And that blows my mind, because kind of most people are on, but they're on for different reasons. We had a customer one time, we were doing analysis on a decision maker for them. And I got excited because we found that this is a pretty senior level, kind of hard to reach these people. And one of the things we found is they loved astronomy, like truly loved, like engaged with it more than most in a way. And I remember the brand being like, well, that's nothing to do with us. We're B2B, we're selling, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you have a partnership with NASA. Why wouldn't you have your leaders or people talk about it? Like, you don't need to always be talking about brand. So I think the biggest thing for me that I laugh about is a lot of times we forget that I don't care for B2B or B2C. You're all interacting with humans. You have to understand them. Now, shifting more to what are some of the differences, B2B, for the most part, your purchase cycle is long. It's not quick, right? It's, I think, on average, 6 months to 2 years, depending on what you're selling. And that is difficult when you're trying to either prove ROI or really understand who you're trying to reach, because in that 2 years, someone's promoted in and out of your buyer, someone's promoted in and out of your decision maker. So I think really trying to understand that full buyer group is critical, because one thing that we're pretty big with LinkedIn is driving value over vanity metrics by knowing and influencing your audience on their terms. But then we have a lot of people who say, well, my audience is this tech buyer. And I'm like, well, it's not actually. You have a full buying group that I think it's like 10 to 20 people. Half of them are what we call hidden buyers. So those are procurement and whatever. And since we know, I think it's like 40 to 60% of deals get paused or never go through because these hidden buyers are the ones who pause it. And you're not talking to them because you don't know who they are. So for B2B, there's a lot more unknown. It's a little bit longer of that purchase cycle. And then we have practitioners who almost keep too much of a B2B hat on, forgetting that some way to reach this longer cycle is to treat your audience and your buyer as a consumer and as a human as well, to make sure that you're reaching them with your full message.
That's great. Thank you. So people are people, humans are humans. There are differences, but ultimately you got to persuade and you got to motivate. Um, so I think mostly in the B2C side, the notion of cultural relevance is a very popular one. When like you, I've participated and led many roundtables and talked to many CMOs, and cultural relevance spikes up. Everybody says you gotta be culturally relevant to win hearts and minds of consumers today. Nicole, two questions for you. How do you define cultural relevance? At Collage, we call it cultural fluency, but it's one and the same. There are different definitions, but they're close. And how do you think you become one?
So it's interesting, especially the time I've been spending in the B2B world. When you and I first had some of these conversations, it really became interesting to me. I used to do a ton of work with culture relevancy that very tied to consumer brands. To your point, like what's happening right now, I remember the rise of nostalgia and how can we use that? What can we do? When I'm in this space, it became, we have our B2B Institute, our think tank, and they were releasing some research, and this term mental availability came up. And I was like, you know what? That's where I see this mix and this crossover between cultural relevancy and fluency and mental availability, because culture moments change. But the idea of mental availability, in my opinion, it's really recall. It's that you are relevant enough that you create a memory. And that's something that we've been really digging into is it's called the first impression rose. It's one of our trends that we came out with. But the idea being, if you're a Bachelor fan, almost always someone who gets a rose on the first night, they almost always make it to the final, right? So if you're thinking about this in my B2B landscape in the cultural relevancy or mental availability stage, when people are ready to buy, 86% start with a day one list in mind of brands. So if you're not on that list on day one, you're never going to be part of that thought. So it's how are we mentally available day one? And on average, people are only having 3 brands on that list. So if you're not ready on that day one list, 92% of people purchase from that day one list. So it's mental availability in the world of all the things that I need to care about on every single day. How are you relevant enough to create recall and to create that memory? The joke is if Coca-Cola was a B2B brand, their ads would be like an ugly can and it's like, click here for whatever. But what are their ads? Their ads are polar bears. Their ads are moments that you create with your family. And that brings that recall up. Like we did a study where like, I think on average, when we showed people an ad and we took the branding out and we asked people, we're like, I think it was like 19% on average, not only noticed and correctly attributed the ad. So they go, yeah, I remember seeing it. And then if you try to I know what's the brand for? At the end, only 19% of that audience did that. So to your point, that relevancy is the memory. It's that mental availability in someone's brain that when they're ready to make a decision, whether it's buying a bag of chips or it's buying, very expensive tech software, you're available in their brain. And it's how do you create that memory for that mental availability.
I love that term, mental availability. I had never heard the term. I think it's great. So that's a fantastic definition. Did we make it there? Can we rent a little bit of mental availability in the brain? I love that. Now the how do you become it? How do you get there?
So that's interesting. And we've been doing quite a bit of research. And my whole life, this research has been happening. We know the power of creative to unlock and make that memory. In the B2B world, we're failing. I think there's a stat. It's like 81% of B2B ads that were studied like failed the creative test and people weren't interested in it, right? But it's attention, engagement, and recall. And what we're seeing is there's still a lot of people who optimize towards a click-through rate, whatever that might be. A click isn't a memory. There was an analysis done that there is no correlation between a click and the Nielsen brand effective metrics. So meaning like ad recall, brand awareness, or purchase intent. But yet we all still say what's going to get us that click, acting like that's what's going to create mental availability or that's what's going to create, this relevancy. So we really have been focusing more on how do we create attention. How do we show that people are spending time with things? Because what we have seen um, is that as you increase that attention, is that we're seeing like is turning more into ROI and conversion at the end. So it's really, really critical to go beyond that because a click again isn't recall, isn't familiarity. It's how do we get to, in my world, ROAS or pipeline value or closed win attribution, which is what we're constantly, it's for that full buyer group. So what we're thinking through is how do we find ways to get their attention with what they need? And we do that through category entry points or journey. If you're thinking about at what point in time are they going to need what I've been selling? And how do I make sure that when they need it, they go, oh, I've been seeing that. So have you heard of the 95-5 rule?
Yeah, yeah.
Right. So for those who haven't heard, we say at any given time, only 5% of your audience is actually in market for what you're selling. But an astronomical part of what people are putting out from communications, marketing, advertising, whatever, is targeted at that 5%, which means your entire budget is going at 5%. And as we said, of that 5%, people are making lists with 3 things on them. And let's be honest, most of the time, you're not going to be one of those 3 brands that are on that list. So if you really want to think about future money, future funds that are coming in, you need to think about that 95%. And how can you be ready with content for, and that you create trust and accountability with them early. So when they hit that category entry point, the need that they have that's unanswered, they remember you, they know who you are, you're trusted, and then you go into that journey of the 5% that leads to the conversion.
Super thorough. Thank you for that. So one difference between performance-based marketing and brand, because the other one you measure instantly but there's no sort of long-term effect. But also data. I mean, right? Like your 5% is data. Like how do you know? How do you know who's in the market? How do when and who and context and so forth? So that's interesting. That thank you for that. That leads us to the famous or infamous AI. Um, in LinkedIn must be so fascinating because you guys, you talk to so many people leverage you guys for such important use cases, but it's all data. So what are you seeing that AI is impacting? How is it evolving? How is it being used? Where are the maybe the guardrails? Yeah, just give us you're in such an amazing seat.
Sure. Well, I think one thing to keep in mind is we, as I'm sure all major companies, have been using AI for years. It's not new. It's how people are interacting with it that's new, and also new technology that is unlocking ways that we're thinking about doing business differently. So one thing that we're excited about is, LinkedIn. Everyone thinks of it different, like how they use it, right? There's the LinkedIn we all use, the platform every day. There's the people who are in sales who might use our sales navigator. There's people who are in talent who use the recruiter. People who are in marketing who are using the advertising platform. There's a lot of information out there. So what we're excited about is AI on the back end connecting some of that data. But what we're also really excited about is the agentic future that is AI. So you've probably already seen in the news that there are things that we're launching, like agents for helping with job searching. There's, agents like even today you can use it to help write posts. In the marketing world, there's ways that people who maybe don't have budgets for agencies or internal support, there's things that they can use that help them bring a campaign to life. So some of it is being able to access data and information that maybe you wouldn't have been able to before because you didn't have the budget, you didn't have the people, you didn't have the time. And it's harnessing that to help make decisions faster, to help make campaigns work better. So that's where we're pretty excited is on the agentic side. And there's a whole lot else that's going on behind the scenes that I don't know as much about. And then my team obviously uses quite a bit, trying to find efficient ways for coding, trying to find efficient ways for interacting with some of our data sets as well.
So interesting. In some ways you're right that you've got AI from a data perspective, and then the agentic AI is sort of the super transformational I think, component of the entire thing. And it seems like we are pretty early in that work. Where would you say chapter wise? Are we in chapter one, chapter two, chapter like? What's your take?
There was, I wish I can remember the quote, but I feel like we are still so early because every single time there's a new unlock, it unlocks 10 million more things. So I think it isn't linear is the issue with AI is because every time there's a breakthrough, it uncovers 10 more possibilities. It's not like, oh, let me link from A to B. It's let me link from A to the entire alphabet because now I can see different ways of approaching it. So I think we're still early, even though AI has been around for years. Just most people don't talk about it. Um, but I think it's almost not necessarily how early we are in the tracker. I think it's how fast we're going to be going through the trackers. We're going to be seeing a massive uptick in the speed of change compared to what we've seen in the past. So I think that's what's interesting to think about.
Do you feel are people cautious in the outcome? In your world, Nicole, synthetic audiences, synthetic research, what's your take?
I used to do a lot more market research than I do now, but what's interesting to think about is I see the need for it because we are very much sometimes stuck in the speed that we need information. Like I said earlier, it's like segmentation analyses used to take 6 months to a year, then they live for a year, then they get old, and then you gotta need to get a new one. Synthetic research, and I've been at some conferences listening to agencies, like Golan, Ketchum, a bunch of those doing some really interesting things, already with some of this research. I've seen some really cool stuff that have been done by, people who actually used to be part of our B2B Institute, and they've shifted somewhere else where it's coming up with, understanding your audiences fast, understanding category entry points fast. The concern a lot of people had is where is this data coming from? Is it tied? But I have special data. So how is my data going to connect to what's out there? Or, so there's still that concern of, can I trust it? And what decisions can I use this for? I think people are more comfortable making maybe strategy, brainstorming, those types of decisions compared to if you're trying to make a true hard and fast business decision on it. Where's the trust coming from that? There's also still a lot of companies who, I get a call almost every day from a different vendor who's using AI to do XYZ. Some are great. Some are very transparent. Some it's back to the black box of, well, we had a special algorithm, a special formula, a special this. So I think it's making sure people are comfortable with it. Like at LinkedIn, we do have like AI powered buyer groups. Cause like I said, there's hidden buyers. We need people to be more aware. And we saw oh gosh, it was a 20% improvement in pipeline conversions because using those. But it is a very defined way of using AI within a data set that already is fairly trusted because we put privacy pretty high. Looking at that world of synthetic, I think it's just going to be crucial that one, the practitioners make sure it's understood, defined, what are they using to train their models, all of that. And then for the buyers to make sure they really understand that and they set up some criteria for what decisions are they going to use this for, to create that comfort level.
Nicole, thank you very much. You have shared such great learnings and takeaways from a very robust and rich journey for yourself. So we appreciate it. So if we just learn from you, we also want to learn about you. So what, Nicole, what inspires you every day? What motivates you?
Oh gosh. Well, I always laugh. I came from my background and how I came into this space is a little different than most. I had an economic background and a history background. Two things. Came out at a time where there was a lot of failure going on in the banking world, and what do you do with an economics degree? And this thing with social data was coming up, and I was like, hey, I know how to use data. Let's have fun with it. And so, to your point, what inspires me every day is I think my background allowed me to ask questions like, why should I why do we really need to care about this? Or it's not just the click. And so what fascinates me is looking at some of the mental models, looking at how are we looking at decision making. I mentioned quite a bit relevancy, recall, memory. That is what really interests me. And there's a lot of work going on of looking at, how does the brain interact with things? How do you get past that dreaded, you have to get past 3 seconds, but that's all the brain has their time for to look for an ad. So I think for me, it's looking at the decision-making process is really interesting. And how do we get a industry that's become pretty obsessed with rinse and repeat of how they reach out to their audiences, and how do we shift that for how people need to be hearing messaging differently?
This is great. This is why you're a great researcher. That is great. And for the younger audience that I think is seeking so much professional wisdom, if you could travel back in time when you were 20, what self-advice would you give yourself?
I think one thing I tell anytime I'm giving someone on my team reviews or whatnot, I think curiosity is one of the most important things to have. If you get stuck in just the day-to-day of your job of I execute this is my only job, you're kind of just always going to keep doing that same thing, maybe one step up. Curiosity is what creates new questions, creates new opportunities, potentially explodes your career. Our CEO at LinkedIn, he had a great post that went viral, a couple of years ago. That was like your journey isn't linear. People who had the most successful careers, it's the squiggle line. It's okay to try something and fail. It's okay to maybe take a job that's a little bit interesting just to see if it's going to teach you something. Some of the most interesting and fascinating people I've ever worked with had what I'd be like, and why were you here? And they're like, I did that for this, but I learned. And the thing that they brought back is what created and exploded a whole new opportunity where we are. We get very obsessed with that. There's a correct next step. I would say there isn't. See where things take you, network, speak with people smarter than you, and be open and curious to opportunities. And don't feel like one decision is going to change everything. There's plenty of timing room. You're going to make a lot of decisions. Some are good, some are bad. And sometimes the bad ones are what give you the best opportunity.
Love that. Kill the shoulds. Is that it? We need t-shirts. Kill the shoulds. There are no shoulds. That's great. Thank you. And then finally, what do you do for fun outside of work?
I love traveling, as you could probably see behind me. I have art from all different places. I really have gotten into that side of the brain as a break from the data side. So I love painting. I love photography. I love getting into that. And I've recently taken up golf. I'm an ex-college soccer player who's too injured to play soccer. So figure your way to get outside and have a little fun there.
That's wonderful. Well, enjoy the World Cup, which is coming up. I am personally very excited about it. Nicole, thank you so much for spending time with us and for giving us so much really great learning.
Thank you.
So this has been another exciting episode of Cultural Fluency Makers. See you next time. That's a wrap on another episode of Cultural Fluency Makers. Thank you for joining us. Please share your comments and what you would like to hear more about. Be as specific as possible. For show notes and more, please visit culturalfluencymakers.com. This show is proudly sponsored by Collage Group, unleashing the power of cultural intelligence to fuel brand growth. Please follow Collage Group on LinkedIn, and we will see you next week.